tune with a melody. If you feel like making sound, make it. If it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Rama, 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 Rama.
sweet welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the reading of the Ramayana. Welcome back to the second reading of the Ramayana. Make yourself comfortable. So, good evening. Last time, the first time that we were listening to the Ramayana, we've heard how Rama is an avatar of God, born on earth as a human being and born to be an example of Dharma, to be an example of truth, sacrifice, austerity, and giving. He has discovered at a young age that the world is suffering, but has also learned about the unreality of the world and about the immortality of the soul. Rama got happily married to Sita and was about to be crowned king when fate turned against him. Instead of being crowned king, he is sent to the forest for 14 years, and Sita and Lakshman come along with him. And the king, he accepts his fate calmly, like a true yogi, but the king is so sad that he dies of grief, and his brother Bharata is being sent for to be installed as king. So this is where we left off last time, and the story continues with Rama, Sita, and Lakshman being in the chariot on their way to the forest. The chariot arrived at the banks of the Ganga, where they were met by the Nishada chief, Guha. The tribal chief did all he could to host the royal three. The night was spent on the banks of the sacred river. At dawn, Rama woke up and requested Guha to take them across the river. He asked Sumantra, the charioteer, to return to Ayodhya, for he preferred to proceed on foot. Reluctantly, with tears streaming from his eyes, the noble Sumantra returned to Ayodhya. Guha had arranged a boat, and soon the three of them were rowed across the sacred river Ganga. From there, the three of them proceeded on foot, much to Sita's delight. The next day, they reached the ashram of sage Bharadvaj, situated at the confluence of the rivers Ganga and Yamuna. Having spent the night there, they proceeded the next day to the sacred hill of Chitrakoot. Rama said, "O Lakshman, please walk in front of the princess and clear a path for her, so that her tender feet will not be hurt by the sharp stones and thorns. I will come after and guard her from the rear." Rama pointed out to Sita the various interesting things to be seen. Behold these trees, my love, heavy with fruits and nuts. This huge hive filled with honey, and all these delicious roots. We will never go hungry. Though you may not have the delicacies of the palace, you will feast on the abundance of nature. You shall sleep on a bed of grass and flowers, and have the nightingale to sing a lullaby for you. You will be woken up by the wood pigeons. Tell me, are they not more melodious than the bards of Ayodhya? The party soon reached the holy mountain of Chitrakoot. Rama requested Lakshman to build a hut for them, for he felt that this was the right place for them to live. Lakshman made a beautiful hut for them, and for about 3 months they lived happily at this charming place. Sita and Rama used to roam around the mountains hand in hand, while Lakshman kept watch. They bathed in the Mandakini river. While the 3 exiles were thus having a wonderful time in the forest, the messengers sent by Vasista brought back the 2 princes, Bharata and Shatrughna. As they entered the city of Ayodhya, they were surprised to see the gloomy looks of the citizens. They first went to the king's apartments, and not finding him there, Bharata went to his mother. Kaikeyi rejoiced to see her handsome son. When questioned by him about the sorrowful looks of the citizens and the absence of his father, she told him the entire story and waited for his look of joy at the thought that he would soon be installed as king in his brother's place. Bharata could not believe his ears. What possessed you? What possessed you to act in this insane fashion? He jumped back as if stung by a wasp and exclaimed in horror, "Can you really expect me to rejoice at this news? Oh, wicked woman, I cannot bear to call you mother. It was my misfortune to have been born in your womb." Ranting on like this, Bharata rushed to Kausarya's apartments. Kausarya is the mother of Rama. And he rushes to her apartment, for he couldn't stay at his own mother's and look at her face. Kausarya turned her head away when she saw him approach. He fell at her feet and claimed his innocence. At last she was convinced of his ignorance of his mother's plot, and then comforted him. Controlling his grief, Shatrughna and Bharata proceeded to perform the last rites of his father. The next day, Vasista requested him to come to the court and urged him to accept the kingdom. Bharata declined the offer and said that he had decided to go to the forest to try and find his brother and ask him to return. When this news came out, the whole city decided to accompany him. A huge parade set out happily from the city, determined to persuade Rama to return. And they first meet the Nishada chief Guha, then they cross the Ganga, they go to the ashram of sage Bharadwaj, and finally they proceed on to Chitrakoot. When they arrive at Chitrakoot, Bharata's eyes are filled with tears at the sight of his brother with matted locks and bark clothing. Rama runs forward and caught him in a tight embrace. Bharata then begged him to return, for he was unfit for the task. Rama advised him to do his duty as he himself had done, and return to Ayodhya and rule for 14 years until his return. Bharata begged that he be allowed to stay in the forest instead of his brother, but to this also Rama gave a negative reply. At last, Bharata was reconciled to the fact that he would have to play the role of prince, regent, for that appeared to be the only way that he could serve his beloved brother. Bharata took out a pair of polished wooden sandals, embellished with gold. These he put before Rama and requested him to kindly place his feet on them. He swore that he could never ascend the throne of his father, which rightfully belonged to his brother, but would place the sandals on the throne, and he himself would only be an instrument for carrying out the orders of his brother. He also swore that as long as his brother lived in the forest, he too would live outside the city, wearing the bark of trees, with matted locks, and living only on fruits and roots, as his brothers were doing. This he would do for 14 years. Rama embraced his noble brother and tenderly stroked his head as Bharata cried on his shoulder. He blessed him and told him that he would certainly return the moment the 14 years were over. He then placed his holy feet on the sandals and stood for a few minutes in contemplation, and then removed them and gave them to his brother. Bharata placed the footwear on his head. He then walked away, while Rama bade farewell to his mothers. For the next 14 years, Bharata lived a hermit's life. Every day the ministers came from Ayodhya, and they would bow low to the sandals as they would before the king. For 14 years there was no sound of music in Ayodhya. The chariot wheels were taken out and all the people walked, since Rama had to go on foot. So when everybody returns back to Ayodhya, Rama, Sita and Lakshmana stay behind in Chitrakoot. Rama had walked into the hut, his eyes filled with tears, for he could not watch them depart. An aura of gloom covered the ashram. None of the three could forget the painful episodes connected with Bharata's visit. They decided to leave Chitrakoot, and they proceeded to the ashram of sage Atri and his wife Anasuya. They spent the night at the ashram, and in the morning Atri asks Rama to go to the Dandaka forest. He said that the forest was infested with Rakshasas, demons, and the Rakshasas delight in molesting the rishis, the holy men. He requested him to go there and protect the sages from the harassment of these cannibals, and allow the sages to continue their life of simplicity and renunciation. Rama agreed to this, and the three of them entered the dark and forbidding-looking forest called Dandaka. And this is where book 3 starts, which is called the Book of the Forest, Aranya Kanda. The next morning, the three of them set out once again and penetrated deeper into the forest. It was only now that they understood why this forest had been called fearful. Wild animals like tigers, wolves, and bears roamed at large. Sita crept closer to her husband and timidly caught the end of his bark garment. He turned and gave her a reassuring look and held his hand out to her. He knew that this was not the type of forest which he enjoyed, and held her comforting close. Sometimes he carried her across swamps and dying trees. They passed many heaps of white bones belonging to the hermits who had been killed and eaten by the cannibals. They proceeded cautiously, with Lakshman in front, and Sita clinging to Rama, coming after him. As they walked on, Sita spoke gently to her husband. I am frightened. I am frightened of the possible consequences of your promise to the rishis to protect them from the Rakshasas. They have done you no wrong, yet you are prepared to kill them. Is this not against the dictates of Dharma? I don't think we should go further into this forest. And Rama, he replies lovingly to her, "Consider the predicament of these sages, my love. They have abandoned all worldly pleasure only for the sake of tapas. By their tapas, the country itself gets purified. All negativity will be cleared. At present, they are unable to perform their austerities due to the harassment of the Rakshasas. They have begged me to save them, and it is my duty to protect them. Now, of course, after having given my word, I cannot think of breaking it. I know well that it is only your wifely concern for me that makes you speak as you do, and I thank you for it. But my dear, I cannot stand by and see these poor ascetics being devoured by these cannibals, even if it brings their wrath on my head." Thus months and years pass by in happy companionship as the three of them wander in the forest of Dandaka, going from ashram to ashram. Everywhere they were welcomed with delight. Sita forgot her fear and wandered happily behind her husband. She would pick a twig here and a leaf there and put a flower in her hair. The beauties of nature were always a delight to her. To her, nothing was as wonderful as walking hand in hand with her beloved, lying in the sun on the mountain tops with him beside her, allowing him to place flowers in her hair, or else just sitting beside him, listening to his voice. Lakshman derived maximum joy from serving the two of them. 10 years, 10 years flew by without any of them feeling the weight of it. It was in the 11th year of their exile that they crossed the Vindhya hills and walked down its southern slopes. And they soon arrive at a beautiful grove known as Panchavati. They noticed an enormous eagle. The bird was greatly excited at seeing them and introduced himself as Jatayu. He said he had been a friend of King Dasarath, the father of Rama. He also had a brother called Sampati, whom he had not seen for many years. Jatayu promised to live with them and to guard them. Panchavati was a wonderful place, surrounded by mountain peaks and filled with fruit-laden trees and flowers. The sound of the river close by was delightful to the ears. Having chosen a spot close to the stream with 5 flowering trees, Rama requested Lakshman to build a small cottage for them. Lakshman built a beautiful cottage with twigs and wattle and a grass roof, and then invited Rama and Sita to enter. They were charmed to see the place. He had made separate partitions for eating, sleeping, and puja. Everything was made to look fresh and beautiful. Rama laughingly asked him, "Where did you learn the art of construction?" Lakshman answered, "When love fills the heart, there is no task which is difficult. The magic of love overcomes all difficulty and gives all knowledge." Rama's eyes filled with tears as he embraced him and said, "My dearest brother, how can I ever repay you for the loving service you have rendered to me all these years? My life during this exile would have been unbearable but for your constant care and attention." The three of them spent a long time in that beautiful spot. Sometimes Jatayu, the eagle, would join them and tell tales of their father, and they would talk of their past life in the palace, which felt as if it was a dream. One day, the three of them sat outside under the shade of a beautiful champaka tree. Rama and Sita were sitting close together, and he was teasing her. Lakshman was sitting a little further off. At that time, a Rakshasi called Shurpaneka, the sister of the demon king Ravana, happened to be passing by, and she spied the two extraordinarily handsome men sitting under the tree. She was fascinated by the beauty of Rama's body. Shurpaneka decided that this was the man for her. The Rakshasas were a race of cannibals, and they had no morals. Whatever they desired, they took, regardless of the consequences and the rightness of such behavior. It did not even cross her mind that he might find her ugly. She was enormous, with flaming red hair and small, cruel eyes. She had yellow, horny skin. She had just killed and eaten a rabbit, and blood was dripping from her fangs. She went towards Rama. She didn't care about the fact that he was sitting with another woman, and asked him, "Who are you, O handsome one?" Rama replied politely, "I am Rama, the son of King Dasarath. That is my brother Lakshman, and this is my wife Sita. Now, tell me who you are and what I can do for you." She replied, "I am a Rakshasi called Shurpaneka, and I am the sister of Ravana. I happened to be passing by and saw you and fell in love with you. You are a fitting mate for me. Look at this little creature beside you. She is certainly not fit for you. I will gobble her, I will gobble her up, and we will roam around happily in this beautiful forest. Rama couldn't believe that this woman was actually soliciting him in broad daylight and threatening to eat his wife. Laughingly he said, "My dear lady, I'm quite honored by your offer, but you must understand, I am a married man. I happen to love my wife very much." Shurpaneka turned her eyes like burning hot coals on the trembling Sita and rushed towards her. Sita screamed and clung to Rama, and he stood up and puts her behind him and speaks to Lakshman, "Please punish this woman, send her away. We will not kill her, since she is a woman, but we should teach her a lesson, so that she will go away and leave us in peace. Or else she might come back when we are not here and harass poor Sita." Lakshman immediately took his sword and sliced off the tip of Shurpaneka's nose and ears. Roaring with rage and pain and swearing revenge, she ran off into the forest. She ran all the way to the Rakshasa settlement called Janastana, where her cousin Kara was living, and she tells him the whole story. Kara swore to take revenge and called 14 of his best soldiers to go and make an end of the intruders who had dared to harm his sister. Shurpaneka led them to the ashram. The three of them were sitting and discussing the extraordinary events of the day when the Rakshasas arrived. Rama turned to Lakshman and said, It looks as if we are in for a bit of fighting. Guard Sita, while I go and finish them off." So saying, he went towards them and killed the Rakshasas in no time. Shurpaneka couldn't believe her eyes. She had never seen human beings who could stand up to even one Rakshasa, let alone 14. She ran back and told Kara. Kara was amazed and ordered his commander to lead 14,000 warriors to fight with this man. The army went on its way, and far away in the ashram, Rama heard the roaring sound of the approaching army, coming like a tidal wave. He told Lakshman, "Oh brother, I think it is better for you to take your weapons and go to a cave with Sita. I don't dare to leave her alone, even for a minute." Lakshman reluctantly took Sita and left his brother to fight alone. Rama prepared for battle. He stood like a rock. Unmoved, he fought calmly, ably resisting the attack. His arrows, charged with mantras, were so painful that the Rakshasas turned tail and ran back. Again and again, Kara sent his warriors, only to be killed by Rama's deadly arrows. At last, blind with rage, Kara rushed towards Rama. Rama invoked the power of Indra into his arrow and sent it at Kara. It entered his chest and he fell down dead. Shurpanekha fled in terror. Sita's peaceful and beautiful garden was totally devastated. Blood and bones were everywhere. Lakshman now returned with Sita and congratulated his brother. Sita rushed towards Rama and embraced him. She was so happy to see him alive. Though proud of her husband defeating so many Rakshasas single-handed, yet she had some foreboding that this was not the end of the affair, and that their peaceful days were over. The only one who managed to escape was a Rakshasa called Akampana. He had hidden himself behind a tree and watched all his friends falling. At last he returned to Ravana's capital on the island of Lanka and reported the whole matter. The Rakshasa king couldn't believe that his best commanders had been killed and his entire army wiped out by a single individual. Ravana glared at him and roared, "Name the person who has dared to defy me." Akampana shivered with fear and stammered, "My lord, it was a man who did it. A human being." "A man? I cannot believe it." Ravana said, "I'll go immediately and kill him." Akampana said, "I wouldn't advise you to do so, my lord. Rama can destroy this universe and create a new one if he wants. You will never be able to beat him in a fair combat. But I can tell you of a means by which you can defeat him. He has a wife called Sita, whom he loves dearly. She is his weak point. I suggest that you go to Dandaka and abduct her. If she is lost, Rama will not be able to live. This is the only way you can destroy him." Ravana's eyes gleamed with green fire at the thought of another conquest to his harem. "Your idea is very good," he said. "I will go to the forest of Dandaka tomorrow and capture this beauty for myself." Ravana then called for his golden chariot, yoked to magic asses, and went to the ashram of Maricha. And Maricha we've seen before in the story when Rama as a young boy helps Vishwamitra in destroying the demons close to his upbringing grounds, close to Ayodhya. And Maricha is then hurled away a far distance and still alive, and he's the uncle of Ravana. So Ravana, he goes to visit his uncle, Maricha, and he's being welcomed by him. And Ravana explains him the whole situation. He says, Rama has killed my general and his forces. He's mutilated my sister. Uncle, you have to help me. Sita is Rama's weak point. If I capture her, he is as good as dead. This is where you come in. I want you to take the form of a golden deer and go near Rama's ashram. You should frisk and frolic in front of Sita, so that she will ask Rama to catch the deer for her. You should then lead Rama far away so that Sita will be left alone. Then I will go and capture her. What do you think of my plan? Maricha shivered. His mouth had gone dry, and he could hardly speak. At last he stammered out a few words. Rama is full of noble qualities. He is very powerful. His wrath will surely fall on your head if you steal Sita. She is dearer to him than life. She will surely be the cause of your death. You are now the happy and powerful king of the Rakshasas. If you want it to last, let Rama alone. You have many women in your harem, all equally beautiful. Why should you lust after another man's wife? But Ravana, he had made up his mind to go on with this suicidal plan. Fate was beckoning him to his approaching doom. In an angry voice, he said, Maricha, I don't need any advice from you about what I should do. If you refuse to help me, I will send you straight away to the abode of Yama, the god of death. Maricha realized that there was no way out. He knew he was doomed to die either way. So he thought to himself that it was better to die at Rama's hands than at the hands of this wicked nephew of him. He said sorrowfully, Ravana, I see that we are both doomed. If you capture Sita, remember, you will be capturing death. Ravana scarcely heard what he said. Come, come, let us be away. I will drop you near the ashram so that no time will be lost. And they go on their way. Maricha changes himself into a most captivating deer. it suddenly appeared on the lawn in front of the ashram and danced around, giving long looks in Sita's direction. The morning sun fell on its golden skin and brought it into flaming life. Sita could not believe her eyes. She ran forward to try and catch it, but it avoided her grasp and skipped off. She chased it around and around the lawn, forgetting the flowers she had come to pluck. At last she called out to Rama and Lakshman. "Oh Rama," she said, "please capture this deer for me. Look how beautiful he is. I've never seen anything like it. I must have him for myself. Please, please catch him for me. I'm sure you can do it." Rama looked at Sita's excitement and was moved. He had never seen her so excited, and he couldn't deny her nothing. He looked at her tenderly and said, "My love, I shall surely capture this deer for you, if that is your wish." Turning to Lakshman, he said, "Please stay with Sita. Do not leave her, even for a single moment. Be on the lookout for danger. I can sense danger. It is close by. I feel that some crisis is imminent in our lives. Guard Sita with your life, and I will return with the deer." He strapped his sword to his waist and took up his bow and quiver. He turned to smile reassuringly at Sita. She looked adoringly at him. It was the last time he was ever to see her so happy. Rama turned towards the deer. The deer seemed to be playing some sort of game with Rama. It would come almost within his grasp and then dance away with a naughty look, as if to say, "Catch me if you can." Rama began to get impatient and also to worry a little bit, for the day was wearing on, and the deer seemed to have some deliberate campaign to lure him deeper and deeper into the forest. Like the moon playing hide and seek between the clouds, the deer would appear for some time in front of his gaze and disappear within the forest. Rama realized that he had come a long way from the ashram. He also realized that this was no ordinary deer, but a Rakshasa. He decided to kill it, since it seemed impossible to capture it. Fixing an arrow to his bow, he let it fly. The arrow entered the body of the animal and split it in two. Maricha howled like a mad dog and fell to the ground. As he fell, he regained his hideous Rakshasic form. His life was ebbing away fast, and with his last breath he let out a cry. Imitating Rama's voice perfectly, he called out loudly, "Sita! Lakshman!" Rama was deeply disturbed when he heard that cry imitating his own voice. He realized that this cry was no doubt to bring Lakshman to his aid. All of a sudden, he was terribly frightened. He feared for the safety of his beloved. He started to run back as fast as he could, but he was a long, long way from the hermitage. Far away in the ashram, Sita heard that piteous call for help, coming from Rama, as she thought, and she froze with fright. She was sure that it was her beloved and that he was in great danger. She turned to Lakshman with an agonized look and said, "Did you hear that call? I want you to go to Rama immediately. His life must be in danger. Do not hesitate a moment. Hurry." Lakshman didn't know what to do. At last he said, "The voice we heard was not his. Rama has asked me to stay by your side and guard you. I cannot disobey him. It would be very dangerous to leave you alone here at this moment. I feel that there is some danger lurking here." Rama felt it too, and that is why he made me promise to stay with you, whatever happened. Sita was furious with him. Her fear had made her lose all sense of proportion. She rushed out of the ashram and said, "If you don't go, I will." Lakshman jumped up and caught her as she was running out. Her unreasonable fear for her husband made her speak in the most unbecoming way to Lakshman. She spoke, "You are a traitor. You are a traitor to Rama. You have followed him to the forest with some ulterior motive. You hope that if Rama dies, you can have me for yourself." Lakshman was disgusted. He said, "Sita, I have always looked upon you as a mother. You are like a goddess to me, and I refuse to be angry with you for what you are saying. I have never heard you talk like this. I cannot bear to stand and listen to such talk. But please do not force me to go." Sita swore to kill herself if he did not go. Lakshman was in a panic. At last, with tears in his eyes, he said, "All right, I will go. But first I will draw this magic circle around you. Please see that you do not step out of it. as long as you remain within it, you will be safe. I go with the greatest reluctance. So saying, he took the tip of his bow and made a circle around her with mantras. All Sita could say was, "Go, go, go." Reluctantly, poor Lakshman walked away from the ashram with slow, unhappy steps. Ravana had been hiding close by waiting for Lakshman to go. There was no time to be lost. He had to capture her and leave before Rama returned. He had no desire to have a close encounter with Rama at this moment. As soon as Lakshman left, Ravana walked with eager steps towards the ashram, looking like a sannyas, a holy man. Sita had gone inside, and he could not afford to step inside the magic circle made by Lakshman. So he stood outside and shouted out, "Bhiksham dehi! Bhiksham dehi!" which was the normal call for alms, for money. Sita took him to be an elderly sannyas, and it was against the code of conduct to be rude to those who wore the robe, the ochre robe. She said, "You may sit outside this circle, for no one can enter it. However, I will bring you some food." Ravana was watching her every gesture and movement with hungry eyes, sparking green fire. She returned with water to wash his feet and some refreshments. It was the custom to honor a sannyas in this fashion. She was totally unsuspicious of the character of the person who stood before her. So she innocently came out of the magic circle. Ravana did not have much time to waste, so immediately stated his real purpose in coming there. "O princess," he said, "you must have heard of the king of the Rakshasas called Ravana. His very name strikes terror in the hearts of all. Well, I am he. Ever since I heard about your beauty, I have not been able to think of anything else. Now that I have seen you, I am filled with delight. My city is called Lanka, and it is situated on an island. It is the most beautiful city in the world. You can have the most wonderful palace for your own and wander about in lovely gardens instead of this terrible forest. Cast away this miserable life and come away with me and be my queen." Sita was furious when she heard these despicable words coming from the lips of a man whom she thought was holy. How dare you talk to me like this? What do I care for your name and fame and wealth? I would never look at another man. Ah, Sita, he said, you do not realize what a great character I am. There is nothing that I cannot do. I have a fantastic chariot which can fly in the air. I can take you over land and sea and show you wonders you have never dreamt of. Come with me and live a life of pleasure in my city. I will give you whatever you desire. Be my wife. I promise I will never displease you. Rama is far inferior to me. He is even without a kingdom. Forget him and come with me. Speaking so, he shed his disguise and stood in all his Rakshasa glory before her eyes, 10 heads and all. Sita was terrified to see him in this Rakshasa form, but she did her best to hide her fear. She knew that if she could only get back into the magic circle, she would be safe. Slowly, she started backing her way towards it. She cursed herself for not having listened and stayed within the circle. Slowly, she tried to inch her way back. Suddenly, Ravana realized what she was up to, and before she could save herself, he lunged at her. Catching her long hair with his left hand, he placed his right hand under her thighs and lifted her up and put her on his shoulders. His aerial vehicle now appeared like magic on the lawn. He got into it and placed Sita on his lap. The entire forest held its breath in fear. The trees moaned in agony. The birds shrieked and flew hither and thither. Sita struggled and tried her best to wriggle out of his grasp, but he only tightened his hold. She screamed, "Rama! Rama! Save me! Save me!" But Rama did not hear. Jatayu, the eagle, woke up from his slumbers at her cry. Blind with fury, Jatayu ripped apart the magic asses which were yoked to the chariot, and the chariot itself fell to the ground and was smashed. Jatayu shrieked the war cry of the eagles. As the chariot fell to the ground, Ravana kept a firm grip on Sita. The Rakshasas had the power to fly, and the demon king rose up in the air with Sita in his arms. Jatayu followed him, but by now the old bird got tired and weak. Still he went after them and attacked Ravana, forced him to land on the ground again. Ravana was amazed but was also getting desperate. He took up his sword and sliced off both the wings of the bird. Jatayu fell to the ground. Sita wept at the fate of her one friend. Ravana then pulled her up roughly and rose up into the sky once again. As Ravana rose into the sky, the sun hid behind clouds, as if he didn't want to be a witness to this outrage. The wind moaned and groaned, and there was a hush of sadness in the air. Again and again, Sita begged Ravana to let her go, but he only tightened his hold. He was feeling very happy that at last he had got her in his arms. He did not realize that he was holding his death in his arms. He was sure that it was only a question of time before she succumbed to his charms. He moved swiftly through the skies. Suddenly, when she looked down, she saw 5 monkeys sitting on top of a mountain. Though she did not know it, this was her first glimpse of Hanuman, who was destined to play such an important role in her life. She was struck by an idea. Tearing off a piece of her upper garment, she took off a few of her ornaments and tied them up in the little piece of cloth and threw it towards the monkeys, hoping that someday Rama would pass by and recognize the jewels. Ravana did not notice what was going on. The monkeys looked up to see a beautiful woman being carried in the arms of the Rakshasa. She was crying out, "Oh Rama, oh Lakshman," in a desperate voice. Soon they reached the fabulous city of Lanka, where he takes her to his own private quarters, and he keeps a number of women to guard her. Ravana had known many women, and though some of them had objected in the beginning, not one had the guts to refuse him for long, and he was sure that Sita would be no exception. He was determined to impress her somehow. His passion was like a fire burning him up. So he tells Sita, he says, she's crying, "Don't cry. Don't cry. What have you to cry for? Have I not said that I would give the whole world to you? Not only that, I am ready to lay all my 10 heads at your feet. Do you realize what that means? I am your slave. Come, accept me. Agree to my wishes." At the end of this declaration of love, Sita looked up with flashing eyes and said, You, you stole me away from my husband. You were too frightened to come face to face with him. You are not only a coward, but also a thief. But beware, your end is nearing. Ravana was furious at these words. Enough, he said. I give you 12 months to change your mind. If, within that time, you agree to my proposal and become my queen, you will become queen of the world. Otherwise, your delicate flesh shall be carved and dressed for my morning meal. He stormed out of the room, giving orders that Sita should be kept in the grove of Ashoka trees, with a strict guard, night and day. Back in the forest, Rama was filled with misgivings. He saw Lakshman walking towards him with a troubled look. Rama went towards him and asked him worriedly, My dear child, why did you leave Sita alone and come here? Did I not tell you to stay with her? The moment I heard Maricha calling out in my voice, I knew that some mischief was aloof. Lakshman couldn't speak a word. And they finally reached the ashram. Rama is tired, hungry, and thirsty. As soon as they reached, he went inside the hut, calling Sita to come out. But there was no answer. Only the wind rustled through the leaves. He ran out, calling, Janaki, Janaki, where are you, my beloved? Why are you hiding from me? Why do you play with me like this? I am in no mood for games. Come, come to me, my darling. I cannot bear this any longer. At last, he sank to the ground and murmured, What I dreaded has happened. She has either been abducted or been eaten alive. Lakshman stood by his side and said not a word. Tears were flowing down his cheeks. The ashram looked like a lotus pond in winter. The trees appeared to be weeping, and the flowers had faded. Rama was inconsolable in his grief. He ran from tree to tree and asked them if they had seen Sita. Will you not tell me where she went? A deer came close to him and nuzzled him with her nose. He looked at her, and his eyes filled with tears, and he said, My darling had eyes just like yours. So soft and kind they were. Will you not tell me where she has gone? He ran all over the place, again and again, his whole body on fire, and his mind consumed with grief. Rama could not sit or stand. Lakshman had never seen him like this, and he spoke gently to him. My dear brother, please do not give way to grief like this. You bore the trials and the tribulations of a banishment on the eve of your coronation without a single word. How can you give way to your emotions now? You are to set an example to others. Who is it who has never had any trouble? No one can escape his karma. But you should not allow sorrow to gain supremacy over your mind. Let us go and search for Sita. Victory belongs only to the brave. Only those who keep trying will achieve their goal. Let us go and search. Lakshman noticed that the deer appeared to be running towards the south and running back again. Look, Rama, he said. These deer are trying to tell us something. I think she must have been taken away in a southerly direction. Let us also go that way. Thus saying, he encouraged his brother, and the two of them slowly walked towards the south. They went forward and soon came to the mighty fallen figure of Jatayu. Jatayu, the eagle, was dying. Making a tremendous effort, he said, Rama, do not waste your time here. Your wife has been taken by the Rakshasa king, Ravana. I tried to stop him and almost succeeded, but he cut me with his sword and sped away to the south with Sita in his arms. Go to his kingdom, and you will surely find her. He could not speak no more, and died in Rama's arms, with his eyes looking tenderly into his, and giving him salvation. Rama was heartbroken and recalled to mind all the happy times they had spent with Jatayu. He told Lakshman, Jatayu was like a father to us. We must give him a fitting funeral. Collect some firewood. He died for my sake, and I shall cremate him with my own hands. He carried him tenderly in his arms to the banks of the river. Lakshman brought wood on which Rama placed the bird with great love. After the cremation was over, the two princes purified themselves in the river and sadly proceeded on their way. It was a sad trek. Rama could not speak at all, and Lakshman walked silently beside him. Both were absorbed in their own unhappy thoughts. After 2 days' journey, they reach Lake Pampa. Nature was lavish in her gifts to this place. The grassy banks were strewn with flowers. Peacocks were dancing and birds singing. Rama was overcome with sorrow once again, and he sat down dejected and asked Lakshman to carry on without him, for he could go no further. Lakshman was surprised. "What is the matter, brother?" he inquired. "The beauty of this place makes me ache for Sita. I cannot live without her. I can have no peace until I am reunited with her. Please go on. I will sit here with the memories of my beloved wife, drowned in sorrow. Where is she now? Lakshman, I am consumed with worry about her. How can I continue to live apart from her? We cannot exist without each other. Everything about this place makes me long for her, and I am unable to bear this pain." Lakshman had thought that Rama had gotten over his sorrow, but now he realized that it was not so. At last, in order to comfort Rama, he said, "Be firm and strong. The pain of separation becomes greater when you dwell on it. Abandon this grief. Wherever Ravana has imprisoned her, in this world or the next, we will find Sita. Come, brother, shed this sorrow and become your own self, firm and serene under all circumstances. Enthusiasm coupled with effort will get us anything we desire." Rama found great comfort in these words of Lakshman, and shaking off his despondency, they proceeded to walk towards the mountain of Rishyamukha with firm steps. This is where Book 3 ends, the Book of Forest. So next week, next Saturday, we hear more about how it will continue. Thank you for listening and have a beautiful evening. Om Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram.